Hey guys, tonight we step across sand that once shimmered under chariot wheels and hear echoes from prophets who scribbled visions of empires that would fall long before they ever rose. You're not just strolling through the Middle East tonight, you're drifting into one of the Bible's strangest and most unsettling prophecies. And fair warning, you might not survive the political nuance, or the heat stroke, or the flashbacks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking east, across land the book of Jeremiah called Elam. It's dry, cracked open like an old secret. The heat wraps itself around your ankles, and the dust tastes of copper. You pass a half-buried column, the last vertebra of a city spine that once stood proud. This is no ordinary ruin. This is a memory still smoldering. Elam was one of the oldest kingdoms in the region, now known as Iran. It stood before Persia, before even Babylon. But its true claim to fame, at least in this story, is that it was specifically named by the Hebrew prophets. Jeremiah 49 speaks of a future judgment, arrows breaking Elam's might, a scattering to the four winds, and a promise, I will set my throne in Elam. That line's like a cosmic power move, right? God announcing, I'll be taking over now. You wonder, throne in Elam? But there's nothing left here except dust and a faint smell of something ancient. Maybe myrrh? Maybe regret? The scholars are still chewing over that verse. Some argue it's metaphorical, God using another nation to conquer Elam, perhaps Babylon. Others think it hints at something divine, literally moving in, as if the land would one day become sacred again. That debate's been dragging on for centuries, like the world's slowest podcast. You duck beneath a fallen arch. There's graffiti scratched into the stone. Old Aramaic, you think. It's hard to read, but the last symbol might be a lion, or a man with weird hair. Hard to tell. You keep walking. Now the air gets heavier. Prophets didn't just mention Elam once and move on. Isaiah brought it up too, listing Elam alongside other nations facing judgment. The implication? These weren't just random places. They were part of something bigger, a kind of spiritual geography. And Elam's positioning, close to Babylon but not quite in it, made it significant. You reach a dried riverbed. Your boots crunch over fish bones turned to fossils. Somewhere down this very valley, armies once marched. The Elamites were known for their archers. That's probably why Jeremiah zooms in on their bows being shattered. Break a warrior's weapon, you break their identity. Here's the weird part. Later in the same prophecy, Jeremiah hints at a restoration. In the latter days, I will bring back the captives of Elam. Wait, what? After all that judgment, scattering, destruction, a divine throne installation, you're just going to reverse it? The duality is classic biblical tension, judgment paired with mercy. It's like getting a flat tire into cupcake in the same afternoon. You sit on a warm rock, trying to picture it. The people scattered, the power broken, then a slow, quiet rebuilding. But if Elam is now part of modern Iran, does that restoration refer to Iran too, or just a symbolic group, like those who were once broken? Historians argue about whether the Elamites were truly assimilated into the later Persian empires or faded into cultural obscurity. Some say they lived on, influencing Achaemenid rituals. Others think they were just absorbed, like background noise in a bigger anthem. You hear wind move through tall reeds. They sound like whispers, maybe from the past, maybe from something else. It's easy to forget how rooted these prophecies were in real places. We read them now like spiritual metaphors, but for ancient people, Elam was a neighbor, sometimes a threat, sometimes a trading partner, always a mystery. And so, as you lie back under a sky riddled with unfamiliar stars, you wonder, why was Elam chosen? Why singled out by name? Was it because of its military, its location, or was it, brace yourself for this, a narrative device? No, seriously, ancient authors had flair, drama. The way Elam is mentioned feels like setup, like foreshadowing in a novel. We're told it'll fall, then maybe rise again. And that divine throne? Well, that smells like something bigger is coming. Just then, something skitters in the brush. You sit up fast. It's a goat. You stare at each other. He nods once, as if to say, "You're not ready for Daniel." The goat disappears into the haze, and you're left wondering if it was a hallucination or a messenger. Either way, it's too late to turn back. You're being pulled forward now, through time and dust, toward a fire-lit throne room where sandals slap against tiled floors and scrolls rustle with prophecy. You blink, and suddenly, you're standing in the court of Cyrus the Great. The torches burn low, the air smells of polished stone and warm parchment. You can hear the low hum of a zither somewhere in the hall, and at the center of it all, a man whose name appeared in Isaiah 45, a century and a half before he was born. Yeah, that's not a typo. Isaiah writes about a man named Cyrus, calling him God's anointed, the same term used for kings of Israel. And here's the kicker. Cyrus wasn't even Jewish. He was Persian. You watch him approach a scroll laid across a marble table, his fingers brushing over it like a man touching the edge of his destiny. That's the moment when you realize this isn't just a historical scene, it's a prophetic fulfillment. Isaiah describes Cyrus breaking open gates, setting exiles free, and being chosen for a divine mission. And that's exactly what this guy did. It's kind of wild, right? The Bible naming someone before they even exist? Scholars argue about it constantly. Some insist the mention of Cyrus was added later after his reign began. Others defend the traditional view that Isaiah somehow saw it all coming. It's one of those debates that'll keep seminary students up until 3 a.m. with nothing but coffee and a pile of Hebrew dictionaries. Cyrus, for his part, seems unbothered by the controversy. He's busy building an empire that stretches from Lydia to the Indus Valley. And he does something radical. He frees the Jewish captives in Babylon and funds the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. No forced conversion, no burning cities, just a royal decree and a big heart for multiculturalism. Eat your heart out, Alexander. You stroll through the royal library. The walls are covered in cuneiform tablets, inventory lists, poetry, a recipe for some sort of lentil stew. In one corner, a fragment of the Cyrus cylinder glows faintly under torchlight. Some call it the first declaration of human rights. You lean closer. The letters are sharp, almost aggressive, yet strangely hopeful. The man wasn't just a conqueror, he was a strategist, a storyteller, and somehow a chosen piece in a much older puzzle. And you're right in the middle of it. Suddenly, the scene shifts. You're in a courtyard at dawn. The soldiers are practicing archery. The arrows whistle past like angry whispers. One young archer mutters about the old gods. Another says Cyrus speaks of only one god now. You realize something's happening beneath the surface. This isn't just politics, this is theology in motion. Isaiah's prophecy made waves not just because of its precision, but because it dared to suggest that someone outside of Israel could be God's tool. Scandalous, right? Like if your local prophet declared the CEO at an oil company was now a divine instrument. Try tweeting that. But it fits. Cyrus changes the shape of the world. He sets a tone for what would become the Achaemenid Empire, a tone of tolerance, integration, and surprisingly good PR. You find yourself at a feast that evening. The meat is spiced with sumac. The wine tastes like fire and figs. There's music, dancing, and a storyteller reciting the deeds of ancient kings. But your attention drifts. You can't stop thinking about how one man's rise was written down centuries before it happened. Was he just living out a script? Or was he a man who chose to step into prophecy willingly? Maybe the scroll found him. Maybe he found it. You ask the old woman sitting next to you what she thinks. She smiles, toothless but wise, and whispers, "Prophecies are like mirrors. You see what you're meant to become, or what you're meant to fear." And then she throws a chicken bone at a cat, so you're not sure how seriously to take her. Still, the idea sticks with you. Because if Cyrus was predicted, and he fulfilled that role so perfectly, then what else lies waiting in the lines of Scripture? Which modern leaders are walking blindly into verses written 2,500 years ago? And more unsettlingly, what if some of those verses aren't about building, but breaking? The fire dies down. The stars over Persia glisten like broken glass. You lie back on a woven mat, your mind racing, the ground warm beneath you. The question isn't just who Cyrus was, it's what comes after him. You wake up with a goat staring at you again. Same one, you're pretty sure. He gives you another nod, this one less cryptic, more like, yeah, it's time. And just like that, the dream shifts. You're inside someone else's vision now. The colors are wrong, too bright, too sharp. The sky flickers like a torch about to die. You're standing in a wind-swept field, and in the distance, two beasts are tearing through the landscape. A ram with two massive horns, and a goat with one strange, prominent horn charging toward it like a battering ram made of arrogance. This isn't nature. This is Daniel 8. You remember it faintly. The prophet Daniel sees a ram representing Medo-Persia pushing west, north, and south until a shaggy goat representing Greece flies over the earth without touching it. That goat smashes the ram, shattering its horns, and tramples it into oblivion. Subtle? Not even slightly. The symbolism's pretty direct. Even the angel in the same chapter explains it. Medo-Persia equals ram, Greece equals goat. Alexander the Great's military speed, that's the flying part. You watch the collision unfold in slow motion. The ram is majestic, rooted in power, but lumbering. The goat is all speed, fury, and laser-focused ambition. When they crash, it's not just military conquest, it's the turning of ages. You can almost hear the Persian courtiers gasping as their empire cracks under the Macedonian blitz. A horn snaps. The goat rears, triumphant, and then suddenly its own horn breaks. Yeah, that's Alexander dying young. Surprise. From his fall, 4 lesser horns arise, symbolizing his divided empire. You find yourself wandering between them, Seleucid Syria, Ptolemaic Egypt, the fragments of something once whole, now reduced to petty squabbles and strange new gods. One scholar you once read compared this prophecy to a chessboard. Persia plays defense, Greece plays speed. Neither wins. The board resets. And you're just a pawn, caught in the currents. A strange detail now. The goat's horn isn't just large, it glows faintly. That's not in the text exactly, but hey, visions are dramatic. You reach out to touch it, and your fingers pass through. It's made of time itself. You hear a voice like a radio tuning. The vision is for the time of the end. Oh no, not again. The goat fades. You're back in a stone courtyard, possibly in Susa, maybe Babylon. The line blurs. Time bends like warm wax. You see scribes arguing over how to interpret Daniel's vision. Some think it's purely historical, Greece and Persia, nothing more. Others insist it spirals outward, predicting future empires, antichrists, end times messiahs. You pass a stone wall carved with astrological signs. The stars don't seem neutral anymore. They leer. That's the thing about Daniel, it won't sit still. The prophecies feel like they begin in ancient geopolitics, but then stretch unnervingly toward the future. You wonder, is Iran still the ram? Are we still inside that vision? Theologians debate this constantly. Some see Persia's role as finished, its part played, its kingdom gone. Others argue the symbols aren't just about kingdoms, but spiritual patterns, arrogance, collision, collapse. If that's true, maybe the vision repeats. Maybe every empire becomes the ram eventually. You sit under a fig tree. The fruit is underripe. The wind smells of metal. Somewhere nearby, a soldier sharpens a blade while humming a hymn in Old Persian. You ask him if he's seen any goats lately. He doesn't laugh. But here's something oddly specific. The ram in Daniel has two horns, and the text says one comes up later, yet grows taller than the first. Most interpret this as the Medes first, and the Persians rising after. But some historians argue the Median Empire wasn't quite dominant enough to qualify. Others think the horns refer to kings, not cultures. It's like trying to map a thunderstorm with a compass. Every interpretation leads you further into the fog. Still, the core moment burns clear. The goat breaks the ram. Greece crushes Persia. And with that, a new chapter begins. Not one of peace, necessarily, just different rulers, new languages, and more temples razed or repurposed. You find a scroll half buried in sand. It's written in Koine Greek with Hebrew notes in the margins. Some prophet, post-Alexander, tried to decode Daniel's vision again. The notes say, "The horn shall be broken, but not by human hand." Cryptic much? You fold the scroll carefully. You realize you're carrying 3,000 years of tension in your arms. Empires fall, prophets speak, symbols clash, and somewhere in the wreckage you keep walking, waiting for the next beast to appear. The goat, by the way? He's gone, but you hear hoofbeats echoing faintly behind you.
You follow the hoofbeats, even though your legs are tired and your mouth tastes like iron and sand. The path curves downward now, into shadow, where the light flickers like prophecy, half certain, half rumor. The air grows colder. You've walked out of Daniel's battlefield and into something darker, denser. The visions here aren't framed like dreams anymore. They're warnings. Scrolls unroll in your mind. Names flicker like oil on water. Gog, Magog, Persia. Yes, Persia again. You duck under a twisted archway, carved with images of lions and olive trees, and step into what feels like a war council. But the chairs are empty. You're surrounded by prophecy now, specifically Ezekiel 38. You remember bits of it, Gog of the land of Magog, leading a coalition against the land of unwalled villages. Persia is named, right there in the lineup, alongside Cush and Put and Gomer. Nations ancient and vaguely terrifying. This is no longer just history. This is apocalyptic drama. You feel it in the back of your throat, like the moment before lightning strikes. You walk through an invisible map. Persia is on your right, the Northlands to your left. The horizon glows red. Symbol or omen? Who knows? You stop at a stone table where someone has etched a diagram. Persia's arrow is pointing down, toward Israel. Now here's where it gets thorny. Some scholars argue this is purely symbolic, a gathering of archetypal enemies representing chaos. Others think Ezekiel was describing a literal end times alliance. And yes, in that list, Persia is always named.
You start noticing layers. On the surface, ancient nations. Beneath that, their modern equivalents. Iran, Russia, Turkey, Ethiopia. People have spent decades trying to match each name to a flag. It's like playing Risk with a Bible and a geopolitical blog post. You reach a well. The water is dark. You lower a bucket and pull up ash. Not water, just ash. Suddenly you're standing in the shadows of missile silos, concrete bunkers, and satellite maps. Modern Iran looms into view, not as Elam or Persia, but as a nation with real tensions, real power, and yes, nuclear ambitions. You can't unsee it. The ancient and the modern overlap like badly aligned transparencies. You pause. The storyteller in you wants to say, this is clearly the fulfillment. But you're also smart enough to hesitate. Prophecy is tricky like that. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's symbolic, and sometimes it's recursive, like a dream that replays in every century with different faces. You hear distant shouting, men arguing over whether Ezekiel's prophecy refers to a future war with Israel or was fulfilled in some ancient campaign long forgotten. One man insists it's a vision of the Antichrist's rise. Another claims it was all metaphor for Babylonian aggression. You quietly back away. The truth is, there's a sense of deliberate ambiguity in Ezekiel's words. Persia is mentioned, but not as the leader. It's part of a coalition, a supporting actor in a larger, darker script. So you wonder, is Iran playing that role now? Are the pieces moving? You sit near a fig tree growing stubbornly from a crack in the stone. You're thinking about how Iran sees itself as a continuation of a proud legacy, both Persian and Islamic. But prophecies don't care much for how you see yourself. They deal in patterns, cycles, archetypes. Here's something strange you overheard once. During the 1980s Iran-Iraq War, some clerics in Iran believed their struggle was part of apocalyptic fulfillment, not of Ezekiel, but of Islamic eschatology, which also includes battles in the end of days. Different script, similar themes, same dust. Your eyes drift to the east. You think of Persia's long obsession with being a mediator between East and West, how it's seen itself as a buffer, a bridge, and sometimes a sword. You start to realize maybe these prophecies weren't about where Iran ends up, but what role it plays in the pattern. Sometimes the villain, sometimes the exile, sometimes the ram, sometimes the bystander with a very sharp bow. You hear a fire crackle and turn toward it. A scroll is burning slowly. You lean in, trying to read one last line before it curls into smoke. It reads, "And they shall come like a storm, covering the land like a cloud." You exhale slowly. A moment later, a voice, not loud but steady, says, "But not all storms destroy. Some just cleanse." You look around. No one's there. You laugh nervously. Then again, prophecy does have a flair for dramatics. You walk on, deeper into the shadow, wondering if the fire to come is judgment or just a really good distraction.
The path narrows, the air thickens, and somewhere beyond the dust, modern Tehran flickers in and out of sight like a mirage caught between worlds. You're no longer walking through ruins or visions, you're drifting through the headlines of today. But the whispers of prophecy haven't stopped. If anything, they've grown louder. A satellite hangs overhead, humming softly. You glance up. It doesn't blink. Below it, the streets of Iran stretch out in patterns older than asphalt. Bazaar stalls, Quranic calligraphy, student protests, secret centrifuges humming beneath mountains. And somewhere, a government convoy inches through traffic while a quiet voice in the back seat asks, "Is this Ezekiel?" You smile bitterly. Everyone wants to know. You're standing now at a strange intersection,
ancient prophecy and modern politics colliding like tectonic plates. It's not subtle, it's not quiet, and it's not easy to interpret. Ezekiel 38 names Persia. That's hard to ignore. But the lines between Persia and Iran aren't perfectly drawn. Iran didn't officially adopt that name until 1935, when it was rebranded to reflect its Indo-Aryan roots. Before that, in the West, it was always Persia. So when Ezekiel speaks of Persia joining Gog's coalition, is he pointing directly to this modern nation? You hesitate. Prophecy rarely operates on GPS coordinates. Still, Iran's modern role in Middle Eastern politics has many people doing spiritual calculus. The country's deep alliances with Russia and Turkey echo the ancient coalition described by Ezekiel. You walk past a cracked mural of Qasem Soleimani, general, strategist, symbol of Iranian ambition. People still debate whether his death marked the start of something bigger. Some say it was a spark. Others say it was just one more match tossed into an already crowded fire pit. You reach a rooftop. The city hums below, alive and restless. To the west, Israel glows like a distant constellation. You remember that line from Ezekiel, a land of unwalled villages. Some say it describes Israel today, prosperous, gathered from many nations, yet vulnerable. Others argue it's poetic imagery, not a battle plan. But for those who believe these prophecies point to the near future, Iran's position is hard to ignore. Its open hostility toward Israel, its support for regional proxies, its nuclear ambitions cloaked in bureaucratic shrugs. You can feel the tension in the concrete. It crackles.
A gust of hot wind kicks dust across your face. You wipe it away and stare at a digital billboard flashing verses from the Quran alongside footage of military drills. It's surreal, like the Book of Ezekiel downloaded into a defense budget. Still, not all agree. Some scholars argue Ezekiel 38 and 39 refer to events already fulfilled, maybe during the Maccabean period, or even in symbolic form during the exile. Others believe it describes a climactic battle still to come, what many call the War of Gog and Magog. In either case, Persia, Iran, has a role to play. But is it central or just convenient? You pause near a dried-up fountain. Someone's written in chalk along the edge, "We are not what you see in your prophecy charts." And that's a fair point. Iran isn't a caricature. It's a nation of poets, engineers, mystics, and revolutionaries. It's hafiz and turbans. It's rooftop gardens and TikTok bans. It's complicated. But prophecy doesn't do complicated, it distills. You remember how Daniel's visions framed entire empires as animals. One horn, two horns, four wings. No footnotes, no cultural nuance, just motion and collision. That reductionism is part of what makes prophecy feel so timeless and so unnerving. You find a cafe, half lit, still serving black tea and pistachio cakes. You sit, sip, and scan the room. A student reads quietly near the window. An old man taps his fingers along a radio broadcasting Quranic recitations. No one's declaring apocalypse. No one's quoting Ezekiel. But that doesn't mean the clock isn't ticking. Because here's the real question, and it lands like a whisper in your ear. What if Ezekiel 38 isn't about a nation, but a condition? What if Persia in the prophecy is less about borders and more about alignments, about pride, about power, about ancient hatreds that never quite go to sleep? You stare out at the skyline. Somewhere, someone's pushing a red button, metaphorically, maybe literally. And somewhere else, someone is scribbling timelines in the margins of their Bible, drawing arrows, setting dates. But you just sit here, drinking tea, waiting.
listening to the distant thunder of a storm that might not even be real.
The city begins to blur behind you. Lights soften, sirens fade. You're walking again, but this time, it feels like a return. Not to where you began exactly, but to the core of something old, something waiting. You cross a broken field where wild poppies have overtaken an abandoned military training ground. The air carries the scent of scorched earth and sudden rain, like heaven couldn't decide which mood to commit to. You pause beside a rusted sign that once said, "Danger, no entry," though the warning feels more spiritual than practical now. This is the final stretch, and even though you're still surrounded by the shadows of prophecy, the tone is shifted. The fear hasn't vanished, but something quieter pushes through, the whisper of what comes after. You remember those closing lines from Jeremiah, "Yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam." Strange, isn't it? The same place judged so harshly is promised a future, not erased, not discarded, but rebuilt. You sit on a rock warmed by sunlight, half expecting it to crack open and reveal another scroll. Instead, you see children playing nearby, tossing stones, chasing something invisible. Their laughter cuts through the heavy sky like sunlight slipping through smoke. This is Iran too. Not just Persia, not just Elam, but a place that remains even after empires collapse and horns are shattered and goats go missing. You begin to understand what the prophets were doing. They weren't giving us maps. They were showing patterns. Pride leads to fall, but fall can lead to healing. Every judgment ends with the door left slightly open. You think back to the book of Revelation, where nations gather, some to war, some to worship. You wonder if Iran, so often cast as a villain in modern readings, might be something more nuanced. A cautionary tale, yes, but maybe also a test case for grace. You pass a crumbled wall with vines overtaking its carvings. The images are worn, but you recognize one, a lion lying next to a lamb. Another vision, another hope. You begin to feel tired, not in the exhausted desert trek sort of way, but the deep, slow fatigue that comes when you've glimpsed too many centuries too quickly. You sit beneath the fig tree again. Maybe the same one. Maybe they all share roots. Birds rustle above, the wind's growing softer. The silence around you thickens, not with threat, but with anticipation. So, what is Iran's fate? Is it the ram, broken and scattered? The servant of Gog's storm? The cradle of rebirth? The truth is, no one knows. And maybe that's the point. Prophecies speak in shadows so that each generation must ask, what part are we playing? Not what was Persia, but who are we now? You close your eyes. The fig leaves flutter, the children's laughter fades, and for a moment, it's all still. A whisper passes through the dust. Even Persia may be redeemed. You smile. You didn't expect that. And maybe that's the greatest twist of all. Now the dust has settled, and the hoofbeats are far behind. Your breath slows. Your limbs grow heavy. The flickering visions begin to fade. You're not walking anymore. You're floating through layers of soft, ancient silence. The prophecies close themselves like scrolls tucked gently away. The voices hush. The sky dims to velvet. And whatever role you played in the story, it's done for tonight. No more empires, no more signs. Only the slow rhythm of sleep, like waves across a quiet desert. You are safe. You are held. And tomorrow will be what tomorrow must be. But for now, let it go. Let everything go.